The Unrelating podcasts are meant to be for education and entertainment. They don't constitute a service or advice. For personal struggles, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional.
Michelle, quick question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have, or have you ever had guilt or anxiety about saying no to somebody?
Yes. I feel like it happens a lot at work. I think in my personal life, I find myself like agreeing to do things that I don't want to do or don't have the capacity to do in like a people-pleasing way. I'm sure that I have improved on that trait over time. The older I get, the better boundaries I've had in those terms. But I still find myself doing it. How about you?
Yeah, same. It's funny. It's almost like they say as you get older, your give a fuck factor goes down more.
Yeah.
It's like, I think what's happening is you're learning how to say no.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's not something you do necessarily as well when you're younger because you're trying to please people or you're just eager.
I think like you're just climbing. You're climbing up all the ladders of adulthood. And when you're doing that, there's more at stake that you feel like you could lose.
Yeah. So when there's less at stake, you're like, okay, I'm good.
And your priorities change. So the things that feel important when you're younger don't feel as important when you're older.
Yeah.
And you spend less time, worrying about the consequences of you saying no. I know people have said like, so they get mad. Who cares?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where when you're younger, you're like, oh, but if they're mad at me, that's bad. I need to fix it.
Well, in today's episode, we're going to talk to somebody who has a lot to say about this topic. And she can bring a lot more clarity for sure.
Yes, and she also happens to be one of my favorite people on the planet. So full disclosure, she is my best friend from middle school. And all these years later, still one of the most amazing people I've ever met.
So not only are we going to learn about people pleasing, we're going to learn about Michelle as well.
And Michelle in middle school, which is such a wonderful treat, I'm sure, to picture. Hopefully she doesn't tell a lot of embarrassing stories. But in terms of, we've had shows about like friendships and stuff. I could not imagine a better friend. All the traits of the best kind of friend you could ask for. So I feel a lot of gratitude for having her in my life. And also she happens to be this great resource on what we're going to talk about today. So it's a win-win.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
And I'm Michelle.
Welcome to Unrelating with Kel and Michelle.
I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist for over 2 decades.
And I'm the show producer and co-host.
Together, we'll explore how we engage in relationships,
why we do what we do,
and what causes people to unrelate.
Joining us today on Unrelating is Laura, a certified holistic health coach, to talk about something I think we can all relate to, people pleasing.
Well, some of us, apparently. I should say, before we started the show, Kelly admitted to not being a people pleaser. Well, maybe you didn't say it in those words, but you don't care about what other people think ever. You just do you, right?
Oh, we'll find. Actually, I guess we'll find out, right? Once we talk to Laura. I'm a wife pleaser. Does that count?
Well, let's talk to your wife.
Okay, cool. Laura, thank you for joining us on Unrelating.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let's learn a little bit about you. What's your background? How did you get started in this field?
So I struggled with my weight from the age of 12, went to my first weight loss program with my parents when I was 13. And that's really where everything started without really knowing where that was going to lead, but really struggled with my weight and didn't even realize it was really my relationship with food until later. But through the years, I would yo-yo diet, I would lose weight, gain it all back, plus more. And in 2008, I lost 60 pounds, and it took a couple years and a few different approaches, but lost the 60 pounds and then have pretty much kept it off since then. And so as I was going through that maintenance part, I was working in advertising, and friends and family and coworkers were coming to me asking me for advice and guidance on their weight loss journeys as well. And I was like, I'm really passionate about this, and I really enjoy doing this, and decided to get my certification from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, IIN, and didn't really know what I was going to do with it. And like 2 months into that, left my job in advertising and basically started my business. And also started to work with my own health coach, which is when I started to learn about my relationship with food, which then is really, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, really what shaped my approach and what I do with my clients now to really help them reduce guilt and shame around their eating. Don't really work with people so much on what they're eating. It's more of why. So when they're binge eating, emotionally eating, and have a lot of like mental food gymnastics, a lot of food noise, really digging into what's actually leading to that, because the food is typically a symptom that there's something else going on. And so we want to dive into what that something else is.
Mm-hmm.
So important too, because, and I like the term food noise because that just hit me. You know, I have a lot of food noise. I think about food more than I want to or should, if I can should myself there. But the why is what is going to ultimately lead to the change.
A lot of times, when we get into, when people are working on self-development or setting goals, there's always the question of like, what's your why? You need to have your why in order to keep that in your back pocket or keep it front and center so that you will actually work towards and reach your goals. What we actually look at is your why not, because there's a lot of friction often when it comes to our relationship with food, or even like you said, I am thinking about food, but then I don't really want to be thinking about food. And if there's times where you end up not even being hungry and eat something that is out of alignment with your goals, or really digging into even what is leading to that food noise, because my guess is some people will say, well, I just want the food, or it just sounds good, or I just have the taste for it. And my guess is typically when we have the food noise, or when we're eating and we aren't really hungry, there's usually something else going on there. And so we look at what's the why not of why am I not doing what I know I should be doing or could be doing.
I was just going to say that last thing you said is like the basic theme of therapy. Why am I not doing the thing I should be doing, really, for myself? I see a lot of parallels between, the clinical work that I do and the work that you do in terms of clients. Kind of one thing I love about your work is you help them get the insight that they didn't already have. But then once they have the insight and it's like, I know what I should do, like to lose weight or to work out or to, work on my anxiety, and yet I don't want to, or it's too hard, or I don't know where to start. And there's all these reasons why we don't do it. And I think your method, the way that you work, is so thorough that you kind of walk through all those, I don't want to call it resistances, but
It is
reluctances.
Yeah.
And it just kind of power through them instead of, I don't know, putting Band-Aids on things, which a lot of people do instead.
I actually think of that as protective resistance. So there's a good reason that there's the resistance that we're not doing what we should be or want to be doing. And there's protection behind that, which also relates to the people pleasing that we'll talk about as well. But yeah, I consider that a protective resistance. So often there's actually a good reason why we're not going to the gym or not able to work towards our health goals, or resist like some of the foods that we feel like we shouldn't be eating.
I'd like to unpack this a little bit more. You lost 60 pounds. That's pretty significant. About what age were you? And then what was the catalyst behind that?
The initial catalyst would have been in my late 20s,
Okay.
early 30s.
Yeah.
I had been doing a specific weight loss program, which I won't name the name, but lost 40 pounds, gained it all back plus some. It was after college. I went to my doctor and she was like, I'm only 5'1" and I was close to 200 pounds. And so she's like, we really need to do something about your weight. And I was like, I am burnt out. I am exhausted I had been on this program for like 2 years, putting in all this effort into it. And so she ended up putting me on a medicine that helped to kickstart my weight loss. And looking back, I probably would not have done that again because I did have side effects from it. And I've learned so much about myself and my body and everything since then. But that was the starting point for it. And I lost 30 pounds with that. And then after like a year or so into that, I went to the doctor again and they said, you have high cholesterol. And this must have been my late 20s. And they said, we can put you on medicine for the rest of your life, or you can address it by diet. And so I was like, I'm going to address this by diet, because in my late 20s, I'm not comfortable being on medicine for my cholesterol for the rest of my life. So made some diet changes, lost like 15 pounds. Then I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer and lost my grandmother, who I was really close with, in 2006, all at the same time. And so later that year, I started putting some weight back on, not surprising, and have gained like 10 pounds back. And so in 2007, my friend said that she was going to go to a program and asked if I wanted to go with her. And I was like, sure, I could lose another like 10 or 15 pounds. And so I went with her and ended up losing, I think, like 20 more pounds or something, whatever it was, to get me to my goal weight. Yeah. And one of the things that I will say too is like my approach, actually, the work that I do in Truce with Food actually doesn't promise weight loss. So it's not actually a weight loss program, even though my story and background is around weight loss. And the reason for that is because even though I was maintaining my weight for years by the time I started health coaching, I was still struggling with my relationship with food and didn't really realize it at that point. But I had so much food noise. I was constantly thinking about food, of if I'm leaving the house, what happens if I'm somewhere and I don't have food and I get hungry, or all the mental gymnastics of like, should I eat this? Shouldn't I eat this? I really want this, I don't. Or I would be in this cycle of eating well for a while, then saying, screw it, eating whatever I wanted, then having to rein it in again. And so it was a really exhausting cycle. And once I met my health coach, when I started talking to her from a business perspective and learned about her approach, which is Truce with Food, that's when I was like, wait a second, life doesn't have to be like this. I thought this was normal, and that all of this food noise was kind of just because it had been around for so long, that that's just the way life was. And once I started working with her to unpack and understand where that was coming from and how that was actually trying to protect me in some way, and working through all of that, that's when life was like, the guilt and the shame and so much of that food noise had changed. And even some of the tastes and some of my desires for certain things, like alcohol, was actually one of the first things to kind of fall by the wayside naturally. It wasn't like I had to really think about it and dig my heels in and be like, ooh, I want some wine, but I shouldn't have any. And it wasn't like I was drinking a lot, but if I wanted a glass, I would have a glass of wine or two at night after work, or when I was out with friends. Figured out part of that was people pleasing, but it just didn't taste the same to me, and I just didn't want it. And it was really interesting to just naturally not even crave it, not want it. And that was from working through it had to do and was related to being bullied in middle school and high school and not wanting to be misunderstood. And once I was able to understand that and learn about that, that's where the food, like I was more naturally able to eat in alignment with my goals without having a lot of the food noise and the guilt around it as well.
Yeah. And I mean, you're talking about food with a lot of clinical words: guilt, shame, anxiety, mental gymnastics. Spending this time with you talking about how linked those things are feels very valuable. And you brought up people pleasing a couple times, which is kind of where Kelly and I, perked up in terms of, I can certainly relate to that. I always tell people that my disease to please is in partial remission, but it definitely creeps up. I have flare-ups. I would love to talk to you more about not just people pleasing, but the relationship to people pleasing with your relationship with food. How do we want to define people pleasing?
I can tell you what ChatGPT said.
Sure.
People pleasing is when someone habitually prioritizes others' needs, wants, or approval over their own, often at the expense of their own well-being, time, or boundaries. Yeah, not bad, huh?
Not bad.
It's pretty good.
Right? Right?
Or would you add anything to that?
I think that ties it wraps it all and defines it really well. I'm just thinking about, there's so much nuance to different terms and words and things that we talk about in my programs. And so I'm just thinking about, even if it doesn't feel like people pleasing is something that you do, I also think about it as accommodating as well. So this is a really, it doesn't necessarily have to be pleasing other people, but it's like, we call this a protection strategy, which would be people pleasing as well as accommodating. And so it could even show up, and this is a really kind of ridiculous example, but anytime I use, and this is related to food, anytime I use the word I should or I shouldn't, the should is typically a sign to me that I am accommodating something. And so there was one day that I was in the pantry and I was eating a couple of chips, and I said, oh, I should just put the chips away, but there were only like 2 or 3 left in the bag. And I was like, oh, I shouldn't leave the chips because my husband's going to judge me and be like, why did you leave 2 chips? And then I was like, wait, because I'd already done this work. I was like, why am I accommodating the chips? Because I was at that point, right? Because I'm like, right. I don't want to just throw out these, or I want to finish these chips so I don't leave the empty bag. And so I decided to close up the bag and leave it there. So that even is a sign of accommodating. And actually that kind of is people pleasing, because I didn't want to leave the chips for then to get the comment of, why did you leave 2 chips left in the bag, right? So like that even is kind of a form of people pleasing. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, I haven't created these boundaries and I'm doing everything, like I'm falling off my to-do list, I'm exhausted, which does happen often for people, right? Where it leads to burnout or resentment in relationships and stuff like that. But it can even show up in silly situations like that as well, where we can even accommodate the food or alcohol at certain times as well.
I think everyone's on the same page that if you leave like 3 chips in a bag, it's like, why? You know?
Yeah.
Just eat them.
Although I'll say if I'm at a restaurant or something, I'll overeat if I have like just a tiny bit left. I'm like, well, that's not worth taking home. I might as well just finish it. So
yeah.
What is that? Just because you feel like you should finish the plate? Is it because of something that you're afraid, like not afraid in terms of like logically, you know, it's not going to make a difference, but is it because you don't want to like insult the waitress or that it would look silly if you left it? Because I've had some of those thoughts before.
Yeah, I think that goes through my head too. Or like, what, you know, am I really going to reheat 3 noodles tomorrow for lunch? I like though that you made the distinction that you added accommodating to the people pleasing theme, because like all things, you could be an extreme people pleaser, which could lead to burnout and exhaustion and a lot of unmet needs. So sometimes people hear a term like that and they reject it. They're like, I'm not a people pleaser. But there's nuance to it. Mm-hmm. And you might be an accommodator. And, you know, so there's different levels of people pleasing. And I think most people will fall on somewhere on that spectrum. I don't run into a lot of people that have no desire to sometimes accommodate.
Isn't it a fine line, though? And this question is to both of you. Isn't there a fine line between being a people pleaser and just being a nice person? Like, it's like ultimately, it's like you do want at some point to accommodate others. It's to some degree. I mean, you have to, I guess they're drawing that fine line where I'm not going to over accommodate somebody unless I really want to and I love them and it's, you know, part of that relationship. But like, I'm just trying to think of scenarios where I've drawn a line in the sand. Maybe it's at work or maybe it's with my parents or whatever, where I'm not going to do this, but I will do this.
That's a great question and something that I get asked often too from clients, because in relationships, there's going to be compromise, right? There's always going to be some sort of accommodation that comes up. It's when that accommodation or the people pleasing is costing you something is where we really want to dive into that and look into that. And costing you something in terms of like that resentment or turning to food, or if you feel so burnt out and exhausted by the end of the day or at certain points, emotionally exhausted, that's where we really want to dive into that to see. That's where there's probably more of that protection coming up and more of that emotional, it comes down to an emotional sense of belonging that we're trying to get. And that's where some of that people pleasing and like some of the acceptance comes in.
Yeah. But if it's of detriment to you in some way or a pattern of that, I also think, you can be a go with the flow kind of laid back person, and those tend to be more socially kind of people you want to be around, right? But that can be an extreme too. If you've ever met someone who is like, I don't care what we do, you make the decisions, I'll do whatever, I have no opinion. There is such thing as being too go with the flow.
Yeah. I could see me getting mad at myself because I did something like I people pleased. Maybe I compromised some of my principles too, but by doing something maybe I didn't necessarily agree with, but I did it anyway because I was trying to please this person, or at least try to be a quote unquote nice guy.
Yeah, well, the whole controversy now between nice and kind. Have you guys
No,
heard
no.
that the goal shouldn't be to be nice, it should be to be kind? Because nice is kind of more, I don't want to say nefarious, but there might be motivation behind nice. There might be insincerity behind nice.
Interesting. I like that word better too. Kindness. We all need more kindness in this world. Do we need more niceness in this world? I don't know. maybe.
But I love this because, we're talking about traits like being kind, nice, accommodating. And I love when we can talk about a trait that is generally viewed as a positive thing, but that has kind of edges to it. So I may be a compassionate person, but I'm not a bottomless pit of compassion. We've talked in other shows about being independent is a good thing, but hyper independence can be detrimental to your relationship. And so this people pleasing, it would be nice to be around someone who wants to please you, right? But if they're completely ignoring their wants and their needs, that's not going to last. And the shadow to people pleasing is often resentment.
Okay, let me run a scenario by the two of you. I went to a party recently. I'm not going to say where, I'm not going to say what, but there are people there who I didn't necessarily want to talk to.
That's me at every party, so I can relate, Kelly.
But there are people there I did. But unfortunately, I got stuck talking to people through the logistics of a large room, talking to people that I didn't want to talk to. And I was trying to be pleasing. I guess maybe I was being kind. I don't know. But at some point I was like, okay, I'm getting a little annoyed here because I really don't want to talk to this person or these people. I don't want to talk to other people. So I was being a bit of a people pleaser though, because I was just trying to please this person, I guess is what I was doing. Right. And
you're accommodating them.
But here's the thing. At the end of the night, I was mad at myself because I wish I hadn't done that, because guess what? I lost out on opportunities to talk to other people that I wanted to talk to, and I didn't prioritize that enough. And there was a window. You have a window. You have a 3-hour window or 4-hour window, whatever it is, to do that. So that's a situation where I was people pleasing, and I wish I hadn't.
That's a perfect example, actually, of one of the things with people pleasing and accommodating is, and often when we're turning to food too, it's a sign that our needs aren't getting met. And what you just described and why you were mad at yourself for accommodating those other people is because your needs weren't met in that situation. And what we want to look at when it comes to people pleasing, accommodating, is often it feels like one person's winning, the other person's losing, right? So in that case, these other people won and you lost. So your needs weren't met. And how do we get to that win-win? And what is the compromise that would help so that both parties are getting their needs met? And sometimes when we're people pleasers, we don't know what our needs are. And also we don't know what the other person's needs are. And so you might have to ask, and it might take some time to experiment and test some different things that you can do to figure out what your needs are. But I think that's a great example. And I'm curious if you ate when you got home, or if you had some more drinks than you would have liked to while you were, I don't know what kind of social event this was. But I'm just curious if any of that crept in because of that. Because that's what I see a lot with my clients, is especially if they're at a party that has food or alcohol, that's where they would be topping up their drinks and drinking more because they're uncomfortable, their needs aren't getting met, as well as they probably go home and have a second dinner or binge eat and just find the bottom of the ice cream carton or whatever it is that they turn to.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned that, I do recall I was drinking more, and I was drinking because A, I was nervous, and B, I was a bit nervous and mad. And at the end of the night, I was just kind of I don't know. I just felt disappointed in myself because I didn't I wasn't more proactive. I think the drinking then was probably just to fill some sort of emptiness I was feeling, right? Because I'm not a big drinker by any, and not anymore. I used to be, but not anymore. The eating situation was a little weird because I wasn't happy with the food anyway because I don't eat that. I like to eat shit, but that's all they had.
But, being irritated with yourself is one of those feelings that just triggers the person to either, punish yourself in a kind of disproportionate way for some reason,
Yeah.
or try and like find comfort. And food is definitely one of those things people reach for. I feel like a lot of people pleasers, they are prone to making more assumptions than the average Joe. So when they are making their decisions to like put someone else's needs first, it's more from an assumption about something than the actual fact.
The assumptions, yes, like it's what I call closing the story loop. So it's like taking a little piece of data or information and making that kind of like the end all be all, or taking that one data point and making it the end point. There's all these terms that we kind of use throughout Truce with Food. And a lot of that, going back to that protection, and I'll use my example from what I was talking about with being bullied. And once I identified there's this belonging story that we often have that is created earlier in our lives. And mine from being bullied in middle school and high school was that if I misunderstood, then I would fail, end up rejected, or be rejected and end up alone. And so that I carried with me into my adult life. And this is a long way to answer your question, Michelle, of anytime I felt potentially misunderstood, and there's a lot of assumptions there, right? So that could be getting an email from when I was working advertising from a client with a perceived tone. And I didn't realize this wasn't logical or even something that I consciously thought of, but in my body, it took me back to being bullied and being misunderstood and had that same risk that came along with it, all in my subconscious, basically. Mm-hmm. And so that's where, once I was able to identify, I have this fear of being misunderstood. And every time I could then see where this potential risk of being misunderstood was coming up, then I wasn't just reacting blindly or like making these assumptions. Then I could actually look at it to see, I see what I'm doing here. I'm closing this story loop, or I'm making this assumption that this client is now mad at me or doesn't like me and is going to reject me, when that's not actually true. And again, this is more of like an emotional reaction. It's not necessarily something that's happening consciously, which is why it can be really helpful to identify what is our belonging story so that we can then see where we are making these assumptions, and how are those assumptions like actually trying to protect us? Because my reactions of going and binging after having those days of feeling like I was being misunderstood, the binging and the food was a way it actually did help me and serve me and protected me in some ways, even though it doesn't necessarily always make sense logically, but emotionally it actually did make sense as to where the food was coming from.
I think too, I'm trying to reflect on myself, and I think sometimes my people pleasing is a reaction to avoiding a perception that I don't want of myself. So like at work, I'll put the frickin' emojis and the exclamation points on my emails because I know that, professionally, I have some traits that are considered more male in terms of like I'm direct, assertive, kind of more directive, more ambitious, maybe. I don't know. And so I'm very like heightenedly aware that sometimes I'm being judged for those traits. Because I'm in a profession that is like I work in nonprofit, so it's like very collaborative, very in partnership, very it's kumbaya, I guess I would say. And I'm not always like that. And so I think a lot of times I'm like actively trying to present a different way, in a people-pleasing way, so that I can like guarantee that I'm seen as a team player, that I'm seen as a collaborator, and all these things. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm those things. But I'm really like worried that other people don't think I'm those things.
I was going to talk to you about that.
My people pleasing.
your collaboration skills, and we should discuss that off mic. I'm just kidding.
It's not my fault you generate a need to tease you in me.
Would you be open to being coached at all?
Yes, tell me. As my client,
please coach her.
Yeah, tell me what to do.
Well, coaches, we don't tell people what to do.
I hear that all the time. Give me advice. I'm like, oh, I can't.
What do you feel like is at risk, or that it would say about you if you aren't a team player, or if you are more, it can go either way, right? Like if you're not seen as a team player, or if you have more of those masculine traits and what you don't necessarily want to be perceived as.
I just worry about being judged by the people I need to have good relationships with at work, and them feeling like I'm judging them because I have a high standard, or because I have certain expectations of competence.
Is that the worry though? Is that, like, when you say being judged, what is the worry about being judged for? Is it that you're not competent, or is it something else?
My instinct is telling me that it's about feeling misrepresented. And if I can trace that back, I think because I've always been a shy and quiet person, I haven't had a lot of control over how people see me, because I don't like, and so, I'm kind of at the whim of whatever that person's opinion is of me without much of my input. So yeah, that misrepresentation piece is feeling strong for me.
So being misrepresented, and some people will talk about that too, of feeling exposed. So like, this is kind of just like pulling back the curtain onto that belonging story as well. And what I'd be curious about is if there's times, like the times that you have some of that food noise, or the times where you feel like, the times you have the food noise, if those are times where you're feeling either like there's potential that you'll be misrepresented, or if it's that you are almost going above and beyond, and where we talked about with people pleasing, like it costing you something, where it feels like it's maybe not authentic to you in how you would actually want to show up or think to show up for yourself. Like if those are times where that food noise is stronger.
What's interesting about my food noise is a lot of times it's excitement. I'm going to seem so pathetic right now, but like sometimes I'll make, I meal prep for myself. I'll make a salad I'm like particularly excited about. So the evening before I'm like, oh, I get to eat this tomorrow. And so it's not necessarily a negative. I do use food when I'm like need comfort, irritation, frustration, whatever. I know that part. But what do you think is behind the like joy of eating piece?
Sometimes it has to do with if we are lacking satisfaction elsewhere, then we look to food to fill some of that satisfaction. There's a lot of metaphor in how we show up around food, how we think about food. And so even if you're like male, and I'm not saying this is necessarily you, just in general, like if we're feeling malnourished in other places of our lives, whether like if we're people pleasing so much and our needs aren't getting met and we're emotionally depleted, that's a malnourishment, right? Like emotional malnourishment. Mm-hmm. And so that's where food can have much more excitement around it. And we can look to food to fill some of that. And also why some people will feel like they have an insatiable need for food, and that's where some of the binge eating will come in, because they're trying to fill some of that void and build up some of that like quote unquote nourishment or satisfaction that they're lacking elsewhere.
Laura, can you redefine food noise?
Again, I'm guessing you've never had food noise.
I mean, it makes noise sometimes, but crunch, crunch.
Kelly, I'm picturing you with like the Homer Simpson head where it's just like a fly or a donut.
I'm thinking donut. Yeah, donut. Some good sidecar donut here, and a big frothy beer here. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so food noise is thinking about food where it just is either nonstop, or a lot of my clients will talk about how they think about food takes up so much of their brain space, because they're always thinking about what they're going to eat, when they're going to eat, whether they should or shouldn't be eating something. And then after they did eat something, now they feel really bad about it and they feel like they shouldn't have done that. Now they have to get back on track again tomorrow. Like that's actually even the pace sometimes that people experience it at too. And it may not be all day, every day. It may just be certain times or certain transitions that happen in the day or different seasons of life, even. And for some people, it can feel like it's all day, every day. And that's where we really want to unpack and see, like, is it really constant, or are there certain times where it comes up a little bit more than others?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I will also mention about that is with this piece around belonging and also our belonging stories, sometimes it can feel like we're thinking about food all the time because it can be like an undercurrent, like our belonging story and feeling at risk can be kind of something that is constantly simmering beneath the surface. And so even though it may not be one big thing that happens that leads us to turn to food, you can think of it as like death by a thousand paper cuts almost, where it's like a little thing here, a little thing there. And then before you know it, that's where it's like all of this food noise has been collecting. And then it's like, you might be able to quote unquote, like hold it together for a while, but then you need to push the release valve at some point.
It's just now you describe it like that, and now that I'm thinking back on my journey, I do feel like as healthy as I eat and as pretty good shape as I am, I have a ton of food noise. I'm trying to quiet that different ways that may or may not have anything to do with this conversation. But that said, that struggle never goes away for anybody. It doesn't matter if you're 95 pounds or 395 pounds.
And just how easily food can be a substitute for that emotional deprivation that Laura talked about. It's such a tangible and easy thing to grab onto to fill those needs.
And that's why I say, like, my program is not just about, it's not about weight loss, and I don't promise that. And I've had clients who they were fine with their weight, but it was the food noise that they really wanted to address. Or there's some clients who are like, I would like to ideally lose like 3 pounds, 5 pounds, up to, 100 or more, and everything in between. But it really is, that's why I talk about it as the relationship with food, because that can be really exhausting. And like I said about with me, I didn't even realize that was what was happening. I didn't even realize how much food was taking up how much the thought of food was taking up my brain space until I met my health coach. And it can be really relieving. It's really amazing when people are like, oh my God, I'm not thinking about food that much. And so they're actually, it doesn't have to be a never ending battle. Like, there can be relief from that. And there is an opportunity for some of that food noise to decrease.
Were you thinking about food in terms of because you're hungry, or were you thinking about food because you were planning ahead for the next meal, or were you thinking about food because it was just filling some emptiness?
At the time, I didn't know, but there would be times where I would be planning ahead, but not just planning ahead for, oh, what healthy thing can I be making? It's like, ooh, I'm really looking forward to getting some ice cream or eating unhealthy on Friday or over the weekend. I'll be able to let loose and do whatever I want or whatever. And that's typically not typically, but it can be a sign that there's restriction and stuff, and not just around food, but restriction that's happening during the week, right? Where you're like being in this box, you're being good, and there's this deprivation and restriction happening. And that can be from people pleasing. It can be from being on instead of yourself at work, or it can be with being hyper productive, whatever. There's a lot of themes that come up for people. But it could, for me, it was like looking forward to being able to indulge at a certain point, as well as it was the same thing of like, ooh, my thing was I would eat something salty, then I'd eat something sweet, then I'd go back to something salty again. It wasn't that I was hungry. It was just like, ooh, this sounds good. I want more. And then before I knew it, I felt awful, right? And then I would have guilt around, wow, I shouldn't have done that. Now I have to get back on track tomorrow. And now I need to lose the weight that I've gained. And so it can be food and body noise as well that can show up for people.
And you're talking about food. I can see us substituting the word anxiety or depressive symptoms or all sorts of other kind of clinical representations in a similar way that you're talking about food.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Actually, one of my clients I worked with, she was biting and picking her nails, and that's why she came to me. And it was similar for her. It was around feeling inadequate and not good enough. And anytime that would come up, she would bite her nails. And so it can show up in different ways. Like I said, the food is the symptom, but some clients, it is alcohol that kind of shifts before the food does. And then it can be like mindless shopping. It's really any habit that, where we talked about really early on in the conversation, any habit where it's like, I shouldn't be doing this, or I want to do better or do something differently and just am not able to, and I don't know why. It can show up in many different ways.
Not to get too psychodynamic here, but I mean, there's so many different childhood experiences that shape who we are as adults, right? That we can all agree on that. And so when you are deep diving into people's relationship with food or their people pleasing, it seems like it would not be possible not to go back to the messages they received early on.
Yeah.
One thing when I think about people pleasing too, and I'm just, now that we're kind of doing more of a deep dive, I'm kind of like thinking, okay, what are some other good scenarios? And one thing I thought about, well, Chat GPT thought about, but I won't take credit for it. Over apologizing and or avoiding conflict. And I can think of, I'll give you one scenario. And this is actually a good learning moment for me. Years ago, when I worked on local TV, I remember I had a celebrity come in. We were doing some work with this person who, and at that point, I hadn't worked with a lot of celebrities before. I remember I kept apologizing because they were being delayed. Because it's production. There's delays, right? Things take longer than you think. And at one point, this guy just rudely says to me, "Quit fucking apologizing to me. Embarrass me in front of everybody." And then, but that, it kind of stuck with me. I'm like, okay, was I apologizing too much? Maybe I was being kind of an ass kisser. I don't know. I was a young producer at the time. But my point is that I kind of learned from that. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be overly apologizing to people, especially if there's delays that I can't control. That was me trying to be a people pleaser to this person who I will admit, I was a little bit intimidated by, because he was a famous actor at the time. Now he's a nobody, but F him. But but anyway, so you
have
see
gratitude for the lesson he taught you, is what.
Well, you know what? Sometimes you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. And I would argue that was a failure on my part. I didn't handle the situation as well as I could have. I mean, I got shamed, but I was over apologizing, or I was trying to people please too much.
That seems like a learning moment more than a failure. And I've got another thought, but go ahead, Michelle.
Well, yeah, I want to hear what you have to say, Laura. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that you have the privilege, Kelly, of society not constantly expecting you to be accommodating. And you knew I was going to bring this in when we're talking about people pleasing, is the gender divide here. And I don't want to be cliche about it, but when you're told as a little girl all the way up to womanhood that you need to accommodate people and be flexible and be kind and meet other people's needs, there's a epidemic of over apologizing in the female community, and I do it. I try so hard not to. I've started like shifting it. Instead of "I'm sorry, I'm late," I'm like, "Thank you for your patience," things like that. The over apologizing thing really gets to me. I have a now teenage daughter who went through a phase where she said sorry about everything. And I was trying not to give her a complex about it, but I was also really trying to break that habit for her.
Is she Canadian?
No, because then she'd say sorry.
All right.
I would love to hear Laura's thoughts, but the apologizing is definitely something that comes with being a people pleaser, or just feeling like you can't take up the same space as other people. And you're just kind of apologizing for no reason, just for being you, just for existing, just for breathing. Like, this is what we've gotten to. There was a study where they showed that 100% of the time that a woman bumps into someone, they said, "I'm sorry." And like 30% of the time that a guy bumped into someone, he said, "I'm sorry."
Yeah. No, I could see that gender gap for sure. Now that you'd mentioned that, I think it's probably more prevalent than we even can notice.
I had a boss years ago tell me, because I would apologize in emails, and she was like, "Women apologize too much. You need to stop apologizing." And that really stuck with me. And now it's kind of bad because even when I've done something that may be wrong, or not wrong, but like made a mistake with something, I'm like, I'm not going to apologize. And it's kind of probably similar to you, Michelle, though, where it's like, thank you for your patience, instead of saying, I'm sorry,
For the
my
delay.
mistake or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but Kelly, I'm curious, similar to what I was asking Michelle earlier, what were you afraid of? Like, if you didn't apologize, or this actor had been inconvenienced or delayed, was there something that you were worried it was going to say about you, that these issues that were outside of your control, were you afraid that there was a reflection on you, or something that was at risk if you didn't apologize?
So I think I was just trying to, in my mind, be professional. And I thought maybe this might reflect badly on me professionally. Would this get back to my boss? Or would I get in trouble? Or would I, you start to catastrophize, right? And all of a sudden, am I going to get fired because I'm making this guy wait? But at the end of the day, knowing what I know now, that never would have happened. But I think I was a little green, so I was probably just a little too naive. I think I was scared, honestly. Yeah, I was scared.
And that sounds like similar to what we were talking about with like drawing some of those conclusions or making meaning of things. It was taking this of like, if I don't apologize and this person's inconvenienced, then I could be exposed or fail or be seen as inadequate or whatever it is, right? And then that could mean I would get fired and get rejected. Like, that's an example of like that belonging story that is playing out in that situation, that's leading to then be like, okay, let me be good here, because otherwise, if I don't apologize, then I'm being bad and can be potentially rejected. And so it's, what do I need to do to be seen as good, right? Or be good. And I think that's where sometimes some of the over apologizing comes in as well, is what do I need to do to be accepted or to belong in these situations to mitigate the risk of failing, or because that is like big catastrophizing, right? And there's a reason for that too.
Yeah.
And then it's also highlights the way we talk to ourselves. Are we making something about who we are or something that happened? So I failed at this versus I'm a failure.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
There's some good action items from this conversation, because I feel like, okay, I'm much more aware of this versus an hour ago. Isn't that what G.I. Joe says? Knowing is half the battle, right?
It isn't a good show unless Kelly quotes G.I. Joe.
Kelly, one other thing you mentioned earlier before we were talking about the apologizing, the other side you had said is like just staying quiet and not speaking up is another way of people pleasing. I think that was something you mentioned along with this. And I just wanted to bring that up too, as it relates to food, especially with people pleasing, is again, there's a lot of metaphor with how we are around food and how we eat or talk about food. But one of the things that can come up for people, especially when they're people pleasing, some of my clients have used the term swallow their tongue or just like stuff it down, don't speak up. Often they will turn to food to literally swallow their tongue, or to keep whatever they have to say in, right? So they're accommodating other people and stuffing it down because they're afraid that it could be misconstrued or it might rock the boat or whatever might happen. And so they're literally stuffing down their thoughts, their feelings, their words with food.
And there's a real danger that if you continuously ignore your own wants and needs, you may come to a point where you don't even know what they are anymore. I've been with people where I ask them, what would you have wanted? And they're like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
And we work through a lot of that. One of the biggest things that we uncover is a lot of this comes from socialization and how we've been conditioned in childhood and stuff. And at a certain point, because we're operating in a way that is trying to be accepted and be seen as good, we lose what we value and what's actually important to us. And so the first part of the program is really like unpacking and digging into and unearthing what are all the ways that we try to show up in this world in a way to be seen as good and to be accepted and belong. And then what we want to do is look at, but what do I really value? What are my definitions of things? So when I've mentioned before, like being seen as exceptional or overachieving and things like that. It's how do you want to define success? How do you define failure? How do you define what it means to be exceptional versus what you was instilled in you and what you got rewarded for as exceptional, which then gets distorted as we move up through our adult life.
That reminds me of some identity work that I do with some of my clients. We actually do a physical chart that's busted up into 3 columns, which is who am I right now? Who should I be based on society or external messages? Who do I want to be? And then you can see, all the things that are listed there. You can see either how far away or how close you are to being who you want to be and how those external pressures are affecting that goal for yourself.
It's interesting. Sometimes I feel like even that who do I want to be, before we get into some of the work that I do with clients, that evolves over time as well, because who they think they want to be is still based on the conditioning, right? Like before, so I'd be curious to see like if you did that a couple times with people, if it would change throughout your time working with them.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It does. For exactly the reason that you just said.
So I think just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, Laura, what would you advise listeners or clients who do identify as people pleasers, and whether it be with food or whether it be with other people, strangers, or their family? Like, what are some takeaways or some action items people can actually try to practice in their daily lives?
Great question. So a couple of things that they can, I always like to give questions because those are considered tools that they can have in their toolbox and that they can pull out when they recognize that they're people pleasing. And again, you may not even notice that, because it's so automatic often, you may not even notice that you're doing it until maybe after the fact. So like Kelly, your example of like, I was really mad at myself and felt really bad after the party. That can be a sign like, wait a second, let me pause for a second and see what happened at the party that is making me feel this way about myself. And if you can identify that, oh, I was accommodating these other people or people pleasing, then it can just be helpful to have that clarity and awareness of what was happening. But if you're able to catch it in the moment or even before it happens, so one of those signs could be if you say like, oh, I should do X or I shouldn't do Y, then that's a sign that check and see and pause. Are you people pleasing or accommodating? And a couple of questions you can ask is, as we talked about earlier, is we want to get to that win-win so that it's not one person's winning and the other's losing. So you can ask yourself, like, where's the win-win? And you might need to get more information from the other person if you don't know. And then another question the listeners can ask themselves is, what if it's safe to have my own needs? What would I choose? So like even thinking about being at that party, like what if it's safe for me to have my own needs of walking away from these people or like politely dismissing myself, right? And going to talk to the people that I would like to talk to, what would I choose? And like, is it safe for like, and again, this is the emotional safety, right? Is it safe for you to walk away from that group of people? I guess those are 3 kind of tools or tips that people can walk away with to reflect and see what comes up for them.
Yeah, I like that. My own needs. I like that a lot. Checking in, the win-win scenario. Those are good ones.
I would add 2 things. One is to really reflect on how much distress this is causing you, as we talked about throughout the show. It's because there's also kind of this cognitive dissonance. I can say for myself, people pleasing in some capacity aligns with my values of I like to be a helpful person. I feel fulfillment from being a helpful person. So I wouldn't want to overcorrect and then say I have to cut out all people pleasing in my life because it's toxic. So, balance understanding, when I'm people pleasing, being aware of it and understanding, like, is this like a healthy people pleasing? Is this a people pleasing that is ultimately having me not get my needs met in a significant enough way where I should intervene for myself? So again, like Laura said, questions to ask yourself and talk through. It's helpful to have someone like Laura to talk through them with you and guide you and facilitate that reflection. But there, like Laura said, there's a couple questions you can ask yourself without that can get you started.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that you're talking about is like having discernment, right? And discernment is huge when it comes to this. Just like with accommodating, people pleasing also is not all bad. And so one thing that I would add to what you just mentioned is, how do you want to define being helpful? Right? Like, is helpful dismissing your needs and putting everybody else's ahead of yours? Or is being helpful, like, there may just be a definition, right, that you come up with that helps you to discern when are you being helpful because you're choosing to versus when are you being helpful because it's what you think you should be doing and what will get you accepted or to belong. And that's where that discernment can be really helpful.
Great. This has been a fantastic conversation, Laura. Thank you so much for coming on. Laura is a certified holistic health coach, and she has been a wonderful resource today. We can find you at laurabfolks.com. Does that sound right?
I'm also on Instagram. And if you want to learn a little bit more about some of the process and learn a little bit more about, we're often in like an unconscious cycle when we're eating out of alignment with our goals or have food noise or body noise. I have a masterclass on my website as well that dives into that a little bit deeper. So if anybody's interested in diving into that a little bit more and seeing how this accommodate people pleasing, where that fits into the cycle, they can learn about that on my website as well.
And I can tell you the masterclass is very like approachable, very user friendly. Laura's not like throwing a bunch of esoteric kind of concepts at you and being like, go. Or the other thing I love about Laura's work is it's not like cookie cutter.
There's a framework that we follow. It's all customized, personalized based on each person's experience and what comes up, because no two people are the same.
Kel, I really appreciated the show for a lot of reasons, but one is that sometimes you hear like certified holistic health coach and you're like, what is that? It feels very like buzzwordy. But Laura really gave us a sense of what that looks like and what it would entail to work with a holistic health coach and what sort of steps she takes you through. And they all seem so very valuable in terms of reflecting and gaining insight about your relationship with food, and just all the parallels that came. Not just we were talking about food for a bit, but you could have put any kind of distressing feeling or category in there, and it would have been the same.
Yeah, you mentioned at one point anxiety, substitute food for anxiety, and there's a lot of same parallels. Because it's one of those topics I haven't put much thought into, and suddenly I'm like, now I'm overthinking my people pleasing. But it's funny because you don't think of people pleasing in terms of food, but it's there, it's right there.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that came out of it is when Laura mentioned discernment, and we talked a little bit about how it really is worth it to go through parts of your life and decide, is this something that is distressing me? Is this something that really doesn't work for me? Because we're also, hustle culture, rat race culture, overwhelmed with feelings culture. And we don't always stop to think, this part of my life isn't working the way I want it to. And then the annoying thing is if you say yes to that, then it's like, oh, well, I don't even know where to start. Or it feels overwhelming now that I've come to this awareness that this doesn't work for me. Where do I go from here?
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes people are scared to ask themselves questions where they might not hear what they want to hear.
In your practice, do you get this topic brought up?
People pleasing or relationships with food or?
People pleasing, like just avoiding conflict or seeking approval or self-neglect.
Yeah, all the things you just mentioned are parts of being in a relationship and, having that relationship not function well for either of you. A lot of times what we uncover is that someone is, neglecting their own needs or not speaking up or making assumptions about what the other person wants and people pleasing in that way. And even with my individual clients, there's just so much we get programmed to think when we're younger from our parents, from society. If you grew up in a household where there was, conflict or tension, maybe you became a people pleaser because that was the way to diffuse a situation, or that was the way you were able to kind of make everything okay in the household. If you could just be good enough, if you could just, make someone happy. There's other types of childhoods or household dynamics that go into people pleasing. Mm-hmm. And so again, it's the idea of either working with someone or through your own self-work, figuring out what those messages were when you were younger, how you came to be. A lot of people who now have anxiety about, perfectionism or have really high standards for themselves and then punish themselves when they don't reach those standards. That can come from being in a household where it was really important to perform or to achieve. There were high expectations. And all of these things, not all of these things, but a lot of these things whittle down to what you are attaching as your self-worth. Mm-hmm. So I'm only worthy if I am accommodating. I'm only worthy if I am high achieving. I'm only worthy if I blank. It's figuring out how that sentence ends for you.
We can all relate to this.
Yeah, because, we all end up putting conditions on our self-worth because that's just what we do. But when you think about it, self-worth is about feeling like you deserve love, that you're worthy of love and respect and getting your needs met. So then when we say, I am only worthy of love under these specific circumstances, that's where a lot of people get caught up.
At one point, we talked about kindness versus
being kind versus being nice.
It's an interesting comparison, I think. On the surface, they sound similar, but I think there's definitely some distinctions you can make.
A lot of people feel that way. They just haven't stopped to think about it. I think that was the theme you brought up, is like, I didn't stop to think about this way.
Right.
Another reason I like the show, which I know we say a lot, but I love that, we have people on that make us think about things that maybe we didn't think about before, or that like resonate with us in a way where now we're going to start thinking or doing something different. And that's such a great gift.
Yeah. No, I think Laura brought up some really, really good points.
I know. She got me with the sweet then salty, sweet then salty. That is me. That defines me.
Right.
At night.
Right.
Always at night. Snacking around.
Well, who doesn't think about food? Like, that's where, I struggle, because there is a joy in eating. There's a joy in food and consumption. I mean, if you're a foodie, you really love to go try new food, and you love to try new restaurants. And like anything, it's like in moderation. I think that's kind of the approach that I take. It's okay. This is great, but like a nice piece of chocolate, I'm only going to do a little bit because, well, I'm limiting myself, I guess, but I'm also trying to savor it. There's a lot of joy in that.
Yeah. It makes me think we all need to be better about being partially satisfied.
Partially satisfied?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Because I think a lot of times in your example of eating just one little piece of chocolate, many people, myself included, would then feel deprived. Like, well, I want 5 pieces of chocolate and I'm only going to give myself 1. And I can either pat myself on the back and be like, look at me with my self-discipline. And, I'm doing this for myself. That's great. Or I can say like, this sucks. I feel deprived of something I wanted. But if we can tolerate the in-between a little more, just in general in life, to say, you know what, I might be only partially satisfied by this decision I made. Think of all the different ways in our life where that would be better for us to be able to tolerate that.
That's the next episode, I guess.
Yeah. But it does it comes down to expectations. Do I expect that I'm always going to be like 100% satisfied? No. Like when you say that out loud, that that's an impossible ask. And yet emotionally, a lot of times I think we're aiming too high in terms of what we expect. That feels like a downer though. Aim lower. That's the theme of our show today. No.
Is it just being grateful for what we have?
Yeah, I maintain that the two most important traits to have are gratitude and perspective in terms of your mental health. And so that fits.
Well, you know what would really please me? If you're listening out there, please feel free to reach out. Email us at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Instagram at unrelatingpodcast.
Sounds good to me. If you're struggling with family, friends, or just life in general,
In a bad relationship and wondering what to do,
or you want a relationship and to set yourself up for success,
then we want to talk to you. So make your appointment on Unrelating.
to be a guest, ask a question, or recommend a topic, drop us an email at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com.
And be sure to follow us on Instagram and YouTube.